Okay, so we're back in our workbook here, and we want to change the default settings in our file so that it's optimized for financial analysis. I can click on File here, scroll down to Options, or practicing my keyboard shortcuts, I can press Alt, F for File, and T for Options. By doing that, it automatically brings up this window here, which I've resized just to fit the screen recording here. So across the left, we've got various Excel options that we can play with. We've got our general settings, formulas, proofing, save, language, advanced, the ribbon. We can actually change the layout of the ribbon, quick access add-ins, and trust center. So we're going to go through each of these together here. Starting with general, the main item that I want to highlight here is when creating a new workbook, first of all, the default font. I've set mine to Arial Narrow. The reason I've set it to Arial Narrow is that this is the most optimized font in my opinion for financial modeling. It allows you to fit the most numbers and words in a cell without having to make your spreadsheet overly wide. This is especially useful when trying to print something on one sheet. Some of the income statement or balance sheet line items may get long names, and so I find Arial Narrow is the best font to fit everything in one cell. Here you can also change the font size if you care to, and you'll notice here that it says include this many sheets. So the default in 2016 is 1, but in older versions of Excel it's 3. So depending on how many worksheets you want to start with, you can adjust this. Personally, I like to start with 1, as I like to be deliberate about adding new worksheets. That way I know if there are additional worksheets, they probably contain material in them. When you start with 3, it's not immediately obvious if you have work on 1, 2, or 3 of the sheets. Next, you can personalize the name. So this is the default here. Let's change it. You can put whatever you want. I'm going to put CFI for the Corporate Finance Institute. It's nice to customize the username in Excel because when you make notes in a field, it will actually attribute them to a name. So in this case, if we make notes in an Excel file, it'll say CFI as sort of the commenter, if you will. And then down here, you've got startup options. So you can tick or untick this box here that says show the start screen when this application starts. The start screen is that screen that gives you a few different options. One is to open a blank workbook, and the other is to open some sort of template. I would actually uncheck this because personally I would only ever open a blank workbook. Moving on to the formulas section. In the formulas section, the first thing you can change is the type of workbook calculation that's performed. So you have an explanation here when you hover over the little I icon. Typically you want it to be automatic or automatic except for data tables. If you have a large number of data tables, they can slow down Excel calculations, but you do need quite a few to really slow it down. I typically leave it on automatic. A lot of people will switch to automatic except for data tables though. You would only set it to manual if for some reason you don't want numbers to update as you're progressing through the building of your model and you want to have manual control over when calculations update. This function here, enable iterative calculation, is how you can have Excel solve for a circular reference. If it's checked, Excel will try a maximum of 100 iterations to problem solve to get a solution to your circular reference. It's important to leave this unchecked so that you know if you create a circular reference. If it's checked, Excel will solve for the circular reference without telling you that it's done so. If it's unchecked, you'll get a warning, and you can turn this on after, so make sure this is unchecked. Working with formulas, here R1C1 is a way of changing it. Instead of being A1 in this cell, you can actually change the type of reference to R1C1. This is not very common. I wouldn't recommend changing that. Down at the bottom, we've got error checking rules. This can be useful if you want Excel to give you an error message if certain things happen, like for example, if you have inconsistent formulas. Now, we would want to know if we have a formula that results in an error, so let's leave that checked. But there may be some other instances, and you can read through these on your own, that you may want to be notified of an error or not notified of an error. Moving on to the next section, we have proofing. You can change how Excel corrects formats text as you type, so you can have autocorrect options. You can also correct what the spelling default is here and add custom dictionaries, etc. I typically don't make any changes to this area. On the Save section, you can click the default type of workbook that it saves as. So for example, if you want to downgrade the type of workbook it saves as, you can do so here. You could also even go all the way down to a CSV type of file, but you'll probably want to leave it as an Excel workbook. You can change the auto recovery frequency. If you're worried that it may crash frequently, you could actually change this to 1 minute. That's really only the main thing that you would change on this area of the options. Next, you can go into language. You can have the default as being English United States or some other language if you prefer. On the advanced section, this is an interesting one here. After pressing enter, move selection, and the default is for the cursor to move down when you press enter. You could change the cursor to move to the right, up, or left. If you're entering a large number of data and you're really just doing manual data entry, say for example a very long list of invoices or receipts or something, you may like having the automatic down movement of the cursor when you press enter. But generally speaking, for financial modeling, it's actually better to uncheck this so that the cursor does not move when you press enter. It just stays in the cell that you're already in. Just scrolling down here, there are a bunch of other advanced formulas that you may want to change. There aren't too many here that are worth highlighting. Some of them are interesting though. I mean, you may want to change the number of recent workbooks that you see when you open a file. If for some reason you only want to see a few of them, or perhaps you need to continually reference a lot of older workbooks, you may want to increase that. You may want to hide the formula bar. I wouldn't recommend it though. And the default direction being left to right, you could actually flip this around being right to left. So there are a variety of very advanced options that you can change. But again, most of these other ones here don't require changes. The default is perfectly fine for our purposes. Next, we can click on Customize Ribbon. So here you can actually change the order and the commands that are contained in the ribbon. So there's a list here of popular commands. You can play around with any of these. If you don't have the developer section of your ribbon added, you may want to make sure that it's checked so that we can do the macro recording later in this course. Depending on your frequently used formulas and functions, you may want to change some of these around. Next, quick access toolbar. Here you've got save, undo, redo, and borders. These are located in the top left. You may want to change some of these around or move the order. That's perfectly fine, although I'm not going to change any at this point. Add-ins, you can add the analysis tool pack, which can be useful for regression analysis, and many financial analysts will use regression, so you may want to add the analysis tool pack. And Trust Center, we don't need to make any changes there. So if you go through each of these, you can get some pretty advanced option changes here. And it's important to have these defaults in place so that you're optimized to use Excel for financial analysis. Now that we've got all of our options set up, let's get going with some actual Excel use.